Good evening, brethren, and to our most worshipful Grand Master. We'll just be waiting for our very worshipful Senior Grand Lecturer to check in. In a few minutes, he'll be joining us already for the lecture. So magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. And in a few minutes, we will be starting the webinar. We're just waiting for our Senior Grand Lecturer to sign in a few minutes, he will be joining us. So to all those who joined in this evening, magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. We have about 250 who signed up, and I think we're having another nice evening tonight to talk about pointers for doing Masonic personal Masonic research. Okay, so this is another exciting topic. So in a few minutes, as soon as very worshipful Teddy Kalau gets online, and then we'll be starting the webinar. Stay put lang po. Maraming salamat, and thank you for joining us again this evening. Okay, to everyone who joined us this evening, I just talked to our very worshipful SGL Teddy, and he's about to connect now. Thank you for joining us. Brethren from Antipolo Masonic Lodge 334, brethren from Guam, USA, uh, brethren from 379, 447, 346. Saan ba to? From Cebu, thank you. From Moraya 252, from Marawi, my goodness, ang layo. From Magat Masonic Lodge 68, Capital City Masonic Lodge 174, Dinalupig Lodge 438, Lawag 71, from Malolos Masonic Lodge number 46, from Rio Grande Masonic Lodge number 192. Okay. Saan ba to? St. John's Corregidor number 3. I am from Melbourne. Teddy, rockstar ka talaga. Hanggang Melbourne, no? From La Trinidad, 344. Saan pa? From Lanaval, Masonic Lodge, 269. Kuya Eman, Mateo, good evening. And then from Tarlac, Isagani Lodge, 96. From Quezon City, 122. Model, Masonic Lodge 373. From Masonic Lodge 387 and 227. From Maranao 111 and Mantigao 243. Yeah. Ang daming sila. Make co-host.
Kuya Dennis, I'm using the other computer for the presentation.
Yeah. Pareho kang gwapo dyan, Kuya Teddy. Parang kakambal mo yung sa kabila. Okay. Saan pa? From Masonic Lodge 99, from Bulusan Lodge 38, from Kasiguruhan Masonic Lodge 423, from 347 217, from Nilad 12, from Cagayan Valley 133, from Pampanga 48, sino pa dumato? From Malindang Lodge 130, Osamis, from Lodge 215, from Guam. Worshipful JC, happy birthday. Birthday mo lately. From Lawag 71. Okay, to all of you there who are joining us this evening, magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. Thank you very much. Again, this is going to be another exciting night of discussion and lecture from our very competent and very knowledgeable senior grand lecturer who is already Christian.
Nakainom ka na, no? Nakainom ka na, Kuya Dennis.
Wala. As our rock star. So, and tonight, it will be about personal Masonic research, and he will have a lot of exciting topics to discuss. But again, before every lecture that we're working under this pandemic condition of our country and our jurisdiction, our Grandmaster always announces important messages, and delivers an important message before we hear the exciting lecture of our senior Grand Lecturer. This will be, oh my goodness, Kuya Teddy, this will be our second to the last.
And last regular.
Oh
last regular
God.
episode. Because the next one is 1 week early. So
yes.
It's coming just 3 weeks from now.
I know. And we almost missed this out.
Natapos natin.
We almost missed this out. I thought this will be next week pa. And
nakakapagod.
and I realized this week na pala. So sorry for those who got the notice late. But still, they're like what? We had 250 registrants, and they're already about 85 now online. My goodness, talagang rockstar talaga tong si Kuya Teddy. And of course, we're very thankful to our cable tow team who are live streaming this webinar on Facebook, and that way the other brethren and those who will not be able to catch in this webinar can review and look back into the lecture that we're having this evening. Okay, so without much further ado, I know the message again tonight of the Grandmaster will again become a trending topic for the rest of the week until we go to reach the next webinar. Okay, so tonight we're again honored to have the presence of no less than our incumbent, infatigable, and very hardworking Grandmaster, Most Worshipful Agapito S. Suan Jr., our incumbent Grandmaster. Most worshipful, sir.
Thank you very much, very worshipful Dennis. To our very worshipful Oliver Yabot, our Assistant Grand Secretary. Very worshipful Teodoro V. Calao, the fourth, our Senior Grand Lecturer. Very worshipful, of course, Dennis Conan, our Chief of Staff. Very worshipful sirs, brethren, good evening. The most worshipful Grand Lads of free and accepted Masons of the Philippines welcomes you again to our local Masonic webinar series called Third Wednesdays in the West, facilitated, of course, by none other than our most competent and hardworking Senior Grand Lecturer, Very Worshipful Teodoro Calao IV. This time, he shall be presenting to us a topic on Masonic philosophy, one of the most, if not the most important disciplines in all of Freemasonry. We call it Seeking Masonic Light, Pointers for Doing Personal Masonic Research. I hope and I am confident that after tonight, we will all conclude this session feeling inspired, enlightened, and most of all, motivated to seek further light, further knowledge, and further wisdom in Masonry. Before I turn you over to our lecturer tonight, however, please spare me a few moments of your time to make certain announcements. First, there is news of rampant surge of COVID cases this week, and I am being asked of reaction from the Grand Lodge. Of course, we should doubly ensure compliance with health protocols in all our interactions, be it in Masonry or outside. Let us not be complacent in this. But there is no need to issue another directive to suspend our stated meetings. This is discretionary on the part of lodges, and the worshipful master is empowered to decide whether to hold meetings or not in their respective jurisdiction. Let us use our discretion and better judgment. Second is on our incoming ANCOM this April 22nd and 23rd that will really push through. We have no plan to cancel our ANCOM, which, as you know, is a hybrid system composed of online and on-site attendance. We are in the process of testing and solving all technical issues related to online voting and election of officers. And once completed, we shall shortly launch a large-scale simulation of systems to ensure that everything will work according to plans. If there are any needed COVID-related adjustments, then I am confident that we can put them in place and ensure the health and safety of our delegates. Third, we have posted online a substantial portion of the reports to be tackled in the ANCOM. We are just finishing the reports applicable to the extended term, and this will be posted in our website shortly. Once all data is in, we shall compress this into digital file, which we shall distribute online to all registered delegates. Start reading those that are available, brethren, and submit your comments, if any. Remember, we shall have a short ANCOM, and we cannot entertain questions on the floor. Fourth, I call on lodges to comply with payment and submission requirements in order to get accreditation for the ANCOM. Currently, we count on about 70 lodges still with deficiencies. These have been posted in our website, and I call on lodge secretaries to please see to it that your compliance is done prior to ANCOM. Fifth, I appeal to all voting delegates to register online. So far, we have surpassed the number representing the required quorum, which is already more than one-third of our subordinate lodges. We can proceed with ANCOM as it is, but we wish the registration to reach more than 90% before the end of the month. If you are finding it hard to register on your own, please call the Grand Lodge and our technical staff will assist you. Sixth, we have issued our latest cable tow edition featuring the details of our nominated candidates for the position of Junior Grand Warden so that all voting delegates will have the necessary information to enable them to vote intelligently. The edition can be downloaded from our website. Please read them at your convenience and vote according to your conscience. Remember, brethren, the rules on electioneering are still in place, and candidates and their supporters found violating them will be disqualified or penalized. Brethren, the ANCOM must proceed one way or the other. So many things depend on it. 2 Masonic years have already elapsed, and actions taken by your humble Grandmaster need to be acted upon by the delegates in order to attain finality. And we need to hold the ANCOM in order to ensure the proper turnover of leadership in our fraternity. My brethren, serving as your Grandmaster for 2 straight years was not easy, especially during this global pandemic. It was, however, certainly worth it, and certainly worth remembering, because throughout the ordeal, you were all with me and ever supportive. It has been a very successful Masonic term because you, my brethren, never left my side. Thank you, and more power to all of you, my dear brethren. More power to free Masonry. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you very much, Most Worshipful Grandmaster. Again, your message will be part of the topics that will be coming in the next couple of days in our chat.
Go-usapan.
Yeah, chat groups. Ang tawag dito. And Kuwait ID, so as mentioned by the Most Worshipful Grandmaster, please do not be swayed by fake news. na
nga. Di ba fake news yung topic natin last time?
Kaya nga, na walang tuloy po ang
Matutuloy.
tuloy ang ANCOM. Plus, there's no need, as mentioned by the Most Worshipful Grandmaster, there's no need to issue additional edict, particular or instruction particular to the current medical pandemic, because that has already been covered, by previous issuances. So nasagot na yan at namamanage na yan ng ating current edicts and circulars that have been issued particular to handling meetings at this point in time. Okay, so to everyone, we're hoping that you have registered either online or face-to-face for the annual communication this coming April 22, 23. Yung pong deadline ng registration is March 22. So for all the those who are listening now and have not verified, wala pong on-site registration. No? Just want to make clear of that. It is stipulated in the edict for this hybrid annual communication, that 1 month prior to ANCOM will be the deadline of registration. So para kung gusto niyo makaboto, makapag-participate sa historical annual communication natin na hybrid, please do register at this point in time. You have to pay and then you have to register using our website. Just go to our website, grandlodge.ph, and then you just follow the link and it will lead you to your registration and uploading of your payments, etc. Okay. So with that, again, thank you very much, Most Worshipful Grandmaster, for your continued support. I and Kuya Oliver and Kuya Teddy are very thankful as well, together with other Grand Line officers and other officers of the jurisdiction in being part of your team the past 2 years. Oh my God, 2 years! Kuya Teddy, 2 years na pala yun.
Iyak na
Oh my goodness. Anyway, okay. So again, we would like to thank everyone who have joined in this evening's event. So we will now go to our rockstar lecturer, Senior Grand Lecturer Teddy Calao, for his lecture this evening about Masonic philosophy and seeking Masonic light, pointers for doing personal Masonic research. Go ahead, Kuya Teddy.
Thank you, Kuya Dennis, and thank you, Most Worshipful Sir, for your message today. I'm sure, as very worshipful Dennis has highlighted, it will be the talk of the town that we are pushing through. And like I said, now that we've reached quorum, sigurado na that we will have the ANCOM. I'm a bit nostalgic tonight because tonight is, Kuya Dennis, our last regular episode. The next episode will be the second Wednesday of April. That will be our last episode. That will be 1 week earlier to accommodate the fact that brethren are going to and preparing for ANCOM.
Correct.
So tonight, Kuya Dennis, we have to congratulate everybody who's watching. Kasi, believe it or not, they belong to a very elite group. And I don't mean that in a exclusive sense. When I say elite, I highlight that those who are watching, our brethren and guests, are watching a topic that is often seen as a niche in Freemasonry, which Kuya Dennis sometimes makes students of Freemasonry wonder. Because why, if we have in the region of over 26,000 Freemasons, if we have in the region of 26,000 Freemasons, can you guess, Kuya Dennis, how many active Masonic writers there are?
Oh my gosh, writers, ha?
Writers,
Ilan? Sige.
It's kind of hard to believe, but out of 26,000 Freemasons, we have less than 40% of 1%. So 40% of 1%, because 1% of us is 240, and if you count the number of those who regularly contribute, you're in the region of less than 100 writers. I want to highlight that there's some reason to be concerned about that, but in that light, we should congratulate everyone here tonight, because this is traditionally seen as a niche in our fraternity, a very exclusive niche, kuno. But what I hope to do tonight is highlight that should not be the case. Why? Here's what we're taking up tonight to our brethren and guests. First, we're going to look at understanding what we mean by true Masonic scholarship within the traditional mentorship mission of the institution. So actually, we're going to see that when you talk of scholarship, not just writing, you talk of 4 core functions. What are those core functions? We'll get to see later. And after that, we'll revisit. In our first lecture in philosophy, we talked about the 4 schools of Masonic thought. Now we'll go even deeper. We're going to look at see how they are actually practiced in light of the speculative purpose of the craft, the fact that we are a practical philosophy for making men better. So the key takeaway there is, for those of us who want to get started as Masonic scholars, saan ako hahanap ng libro or articles? So the key takeaway here is to show you how these schools think. We are going to show you, if you're going to start creating a Masonic library, the 8 core works that you should have in your library to start out with. 2 for each school. So if you know, therefore, the core functions of what it is to be a Masonic student, a student of a serious student of our philosophy, and you realize that there are many perspectives, there are 4 major perspectives for understanding what we do, then you are prepared to create a credible Masonic paper. So how do you know if it's credible? So we're going to propose, well, it's not really me, it's the editor of a major Masonic journal who came up with these benchmarks. Given how our lodge is organized and its initiatic focus, remember that when we do work, it's, to provide the initiatic experience to our members. Using that as a guide, you'll see here proposed 3 benchmarks for determining if your writing will be credible to brethren, not just brethren, but also to those who, any student of Freemasonry. So hopefully you can bring this with you later, and we'll also have some other tips, not just on the process, but how to find, for example, interesting topics in that will get you incentivized to write. Okay, and then finally we'll spend a few minutes on a major initiative that is going to be launched this March, and it concerns this broader view of Masonic scholarship. Now, so that's what we're going to be taking up today, and hopefully this will not just increase people who contribute to our official publication, the Cable Toe, but also people who produce lodge newsletters, people who lecture, people who rehearse our liturgy. We'll see how that all fits in today, so that we will have more, not just Masonic writers, but real Masonic scholars. With that, I'd like to congratulate the editor of our official publication, who is up there in his period costume, because he's also a part-time actor. Very worshipful Harold Santiago, our just recently promoted last month as our first Grand Scribe. Okay, so I want to highlight before I go further, brethren, despite the fact that you might find a lot of this after finishing it new and exciting, I want to highlight what I'm presenting you today is just the tip of the iceberg. You will not be an expert in Masonic philosophy after this session. Okay, so if you are encouraged by these topics, remember we have our IMAS diploma program. I understand from Very Worshipful Rudy Ong that our IMAS president, that our first class in our newly renovated classroom, of course there's going to be distance requirements because of the current pandemic, but our first class in our newly renovated classroom at the Plaridel Masonic Temple is slated to begin in April. So you might be able to catch that if you want to catch it live. Okay, so with that, let's go to what we're covering today. Basically 3 things. Okay, first, why do Masonic scholarship? Why study Freemasonry? A lot of brethren, unfortunately, after they are proficient in the exam, a lot of them think that, okay, Mason na ako. Tapos ang boxing. Right? I mean, not knowing that really that's the start of their journey. We have to ask, why do some brethren feel that way? Maybe it's because we think of Masonic scholarship as Masonic writing mainly. Maybe we think that it has no connection to our organization, its core purposes. I hope that this first topic will disabuse you. We're going to go into the rationale for Masonic scholarship, and we'll see why it very closely intertwines with the mentoring mission of our fraternity. At the end of the day, we are not the Rotary Club. We are not the national government. We are a very unique organization that essentially focuses on practicing a very secular philosophy for making men better. That is based on mentorship. That's why we're all male. There are, of course, other organizations of females that try to practice our philosophy, but in order to be to mentor someone, you have to be of the same mold and character. That's why we're an all-male institution, and we're going to see how that interlinks with the need to take seriously the lessons of the craft. We're going to find that out in our first topic. And then you already know this in our first lecture on Masonic philosophy, explaining the initiatic experience of why we have 3 degrees. Okay, we are going to go back now to the 4 major perspectives of doing or discussing or studying Masonic philosophy. But this time, we're going to be very practical. We're going to ask, what does it mean to actually discuss from a specific perspective the 4 schools? And more importantly, for those of you who are, incentivized after this presentation who have not done it yet, and you want to start doing your own Masonic library, we have specific recommendations for you, 8 recommendations, 2 per school, so that you can start out. And it takes into account our proposed recommendations in the first topic as to why many brethren don't bother to go deeper. Okay, so the second topic builds on the first one. Now, if you have both, if you know why you should get into Masonic scholarship, if you know why you should study our craft, okay, not just do lodge activities, but really study what it means to be a Mason, and you understand that there are right now, at present, at least 4 major ways to see, approaches or perspectives to doing that, then you're ready to start writing. So specifically for Masonic writers, we're going to look at what it means to have a credible Masonic paper, so that perhaps one day you can also end up doing what I do here. These are 2 books that I was executive editor of, the Centennial history book in 2012, 100 Years of Craftsmanship. And then, of course, during the term of Most Worshipful, Bambol Tolentino, we came out with a book specially devoted to local lodges, explaining their heritage, each lodge's heritage, heraldry, their devices, their seals, and the commitment of brethren, the heart of the brethren in each lodge. The thing is, when we did that book just like 4 years ago, 2017, there were only about 350 lodges. Now, I think there are another 50 have come into play. So maybe that book will require very soon an update from all our new lodges. Okay, so first topic, Kuya Dennis, is rationale. But before that, we have our first poll. Kuya Dennis, can we ask everyone in the webinar, all of you here now today, what do you think, true or false? Is Masonic scholarship really just about engaging in Masonic writing? So all of the answers below have some shade of truth in them. Alam mo naman kami, poll question, we want to make sure it's very tricky. Okay, so all of them have some shade of truth. Which is the most accurate? Which is the most truthful? Or I wouldn't say truth. Which is the most correct? Is it A, true? As to be a scholar means expressing something original, right? So Masonic scholarship is really just about engaging in Masonic writing. Is that true? Because, if you're a scholar, you have to express something original. Or is it, hindi, mali yan, false? Because scholarship involves activities other than researching and writing. Huh? Paano yun? How is that? That sounds strange. Okay? Or true? The real test, brethren and guests, of Masonic scholarship is a critical consideration of previous sources. Why? As you know, a lot of non-Masons, they get any book, they go through it, they read something there that they think uh, legitimizes their view of Masonry, and before you know it, you have fake news, like what we discussed last month, right? So the real test should be how you critically consider previous sources. Or, no. Masonic scholarship is not really about just engaging in Masonic writing. Because if you just write, and kung anong ilagay mo dyan, baka mamaya, it's not really credible, right? So it's not just engaging in writing. Kuya Dennis, can we have our poll? Okay.
May early forerunner.
How are we going? How are we doing?
We have like about 125 participants now, and 121 are participating in the election.
Okay,
And
while they're doing that, for those who are taking the poll, now that we have 40% who have answered, you might wonder what that website is doing there. That website, if you want to join this organization, it is the premier Masonic Lodge of Research in the world. Premier in the sense that they are the leading proponents of what we call the authentic school of Freemasonry. Okay, if there are historians who want to judge their articles in Filipino, hindi tayo mahihiya because the articles that they peer review, as these are presented in their lodge and as published in their journal, Ars Quatur Coronati, meet the highest standards for historical practice. Because the proponents here are primarily the proponents of the authentic school. If you want to join their correspondence circle so that every year you get the copy of the annual journal, please feel free to click that link or get that link when we issue the handout after. So that's one of 3 organizations I will be recommending in addition to what we will end up today. Okay, so if you are thinking of exposing yourself more and you want to look at one particular school that is dominant in the United Kingdom, it's the authentic school, okay, which highlights that factual accuracy as to how they present their articles. You should see that. Okay, so can we share the poll results, Kuya Dennis?
get ready, yan.
Okay. So as you can see, I'll let me just close this. Okay, here are the results of the poll. First, let's go with the least popular. Okay, clearly, Masonic scholarship is more than just original expression. I think I already hinted on that earlier when I highlighted that there are actually 4 core functions. But in a sense, yes, it does involve also expressing original thought. But that's not the only thing that you do if you're a serious student of Freemasonry. Let's go to the 2 other more popular choices. Okay. What about the fact that you must have critical consideration of your sources? Yes, that's somewhat correct. But like I said, that does not encompass all of Masonic scholarship. And you'll see when you go through the other functions later, you might be surprised that you can actually do Masonic scholarship without even writing a single sentence. How is that possible? We'll see later. Okay, let's now go to the other false. Okay, the other false, which is not as popular, D. Why is that actually not the most accurate? Well, it's true. Just because you write, if it's not credible, that you're clearly not a Masonic writer yet. If you cannot produce a credible if you cannot credibly write in the discipline. But the point of starting out, and everybody starts out sooner or later, is that you will develop, you will become better. So don't be afraid to start somewhere, because everybody has to start somewhere, right? So it's not the perspective. If you were from the practical school like me, it's not the perspective that you want to highlight. Although yes, there's a grain of truth in it. So what is the correct answer? The most accurate answer here is false. Because as I already hinted earlier, there are other activities. There are activities other than researching and writing. What are those other activities? Maybe we can go forward. Wait, let me just click this out. What are those other activities? Well, that's what we're going to study now. When we talk about the reason to get into seriously studying our discipline, we must highlight that, Masonic scholarship is not just for writers. It is for everyone. Yes, writers do the highest and most important function, which is creating original work, and that is essentially what we call investigation. But investigation, not a criminal investigation, but philosophical investigation. You going through the material and creating new insights by reflecting on it and by bringing and producing new work. Philosophical investigation, which Masonic writers do, is just one function. Today, we're going to highlight, for those of you who are new to this discipline, that being a student of Freemasonry also involves instruction, integration, and introspection. And if you realize na, apat pala, there are 4 functions, maybe then you'll realize, oh, if there are not enough of us doing those functions, maybe that's a reason why many brethren don't take our philosophy as seriously as they should. It all boils down to the fact that we are an organization that at its core has a mentoring mission. And because we have a mentoring mission, we cannot escape the fact that if we do scholarship, if we study Freemasonry, we have to do all 4 functions, because you cannot go right away to philosophical investigation without mastering the other 3, as we will find out later. And that's why, at the end of this portion, we will talk about climbing one's personal Mount Herodom. Mount Herodom in the mythical school of Freemasonry is the mythical mountain in Scotland that highlights wisdom. It is also the title of the academic journal of the Scottish Rite Research Society. Okay? How do you progress in Freemasonry? How do you climb your own personal Mount Herodom? Well, first you have to learn the first 4 first you have to learn the 4 core functions of what it means to be a student of Freemasonry. One of which you already know, because it encompasses 40% of 1% of all Filipino Freemasons. I want to highlight that again. 40% of 1%, about 100 Filipino Freemasons. Okay? Some of them actually might produce a new work once every 2 years, 3 years. Okay? We already talked about this. Diba? The 4 schools of Masonic thought, and they're divided in the way, 1, whether they seek to describe or prescribe. They seek to describe what is the philosophy, or prescribe a way of action. 1, or they want to look at more focused on reason or meaning, mystical versus rational models. So there are 4 major schools here that are highlighted, and later we'll go into why, at its highest, if you really are into Masonic scholarship, ito yung gagawin nyo. In Filipino, this is what you end up getting incentivized to do. But I want to highlight, this is actually the top of what we call the mythical mountain of Mount Herodom in the Scottish Rite. If you are incentivized and after years of, or sometimes after a period, it may not necessarily be years, you're incentivized to actually write from one of the perspectives of these schools, that is just one core function. The most basic function of Masonic scholarship is instruction. I'm going to highlight that again. The most basic function of Masonic scholarship is instruction, as highlighted by the past Grand Secretary and past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, Most Worshipful Thomas Jackson, in his article, Masonic Education, Looking to the Future. You know, let me segue a bit. In the Muslim world, which for those of you who don't know, was among the first to create the world's first universities. If you are in, for you to have the equivalent of what we now know as a PhD, okay, you did not do original scholarship as we know it today. What you did was memorize the Quran. I'm serious. You memorize the entire Quran and you recite it. Why? Because inherently, Masonic scholars started out as those who could credibly instruct on the Muslim religion, which is the basis of which is the Quran. That you take it out of religion and go into our philosophy is also what Most Worshipful Jackson also means. In countries where Freemasonry really thrives, members are required to learn. Okay, and I think that one of the achievements of Most Worshipful June this year is, and those who have preceded him, going back to Most Worshipful Tolentino, going back to Most Worshipful Espino, going back to Most Worshipful Gabionza, these past 2 decades, there has been a there has been a growing focus on Masonic education. Okay, but here's the thing. That focus sometimes has been misplaced. Because when we think of Masonic education, we think of, you think of people like maybe me, who, do produce these kinds of lectures. When actually, when you talk about instruction, at its core, the function of instruction in Masonic scholarship is to make sure that all brethren are proficient in our liturgy, in our rituals. In short, it is an inherently oral tradition. Okay, so you don't have to write. You don't have to write anything to be a Masonic scholar if your focus is instruction, because that is the most basic. That is the most basic function of Masonic scholarship. Very worshipful Louis Coronel, the head of our faculty in IMES on rituals. He doesn't write, but he's just as much a Masonic scholar because he exemplifies what a Masonic lecturer should be. Over time, you see, as I've highlighted in the history of the Office of Lecturer last September, over time, the Office of Lecturer has involved doing activities like this. But our core function has always been oral. And that oral function is to guide brethren and make sure that they know their liturgy, because our philosophy starts and blossoms from knowing what we have in our first, second, and third degrees. Okay, so that I hope that way, by highlighting this, that at this point, you can do away, for those of you who are not into this as much, do away with this myth of Masonic scholarship as a writer's monopoly. No. If all you do in the craft is to be a good DGL, okay, or to be a good junior grand lecturer, a member of our lecturer corps, simply by exemplifying and lecturing on the liturgy, doing what we call lodges of instruction, you are as much a Masonic scholar as Masonic writers, because our craft is inherently oral. Remember, part of your obligation, something about not writing, something. Obviously, I cannot go into the obligation now, but there's a prohibition there, right? Something about writing. I'm not going to go into that. For those brethren who know our obligation, know this. But if you know that prohibition, then you know that we are an inherently an organization that have traditions that are inherently oral. So, just to highlight, very worshipful Hermogenes Oliveros, one of our longest serving SGLs. He served such long period in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, not because he writes, but because he best exemplifies this oral tradition. He essentially became full-time, going around teaching, providing lodges of instruction on our liturgy. Okay? And this is not, I want to highlight, this is not unique to the Philippines. The emulation lodge, which is a lodge of one of the most respected, there are several, but one of the most respected lodges of instruction in the United Grand Lodge of England. All they do is exemplify the work. And if you do it well, you get what you call the silver matchbox, engraving the date where you perform the first degree, the second degree, the third degree flawlessly, without coaching, without error. They'll remember that. They'll put that in the matchbox, the date when you did the first opening, close, and did the cofferal flawlessly, and you get a matchbox. Why? Because there's no recording of what you said. There's nothing in writing. You didn't put it down. It's not an exam. You performed it before brethren. So they will attest that you performed it flawlessly, and you will end up getting that silver matchbox. Maybe we should. And sometimes I wonder, we have a lot of lecturers who we don't recognize because they don't write, they don't really do Masonic education, but when it comes to lodges of instruction in Filipino, ang galing, jackpot. Maybe we should start that tradition also. Although with a lot of us not smoking anymore, maybe we should, Kuya Dennis, baka we should find something else, diba? So, but I want to highlight, that is the first function of Masonic scholarship. Masonic scholarship as education. You have to make sure the brethren know our liturgy well, because it is through that liturgy practiced every day that, as I highlight earlier when we did our announcement of this topic, that is how you do a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. As highlighted by worshipful brother Anthony Baker of Cotur Coronati, okay, he writes an article that basically with the thesis that we shouldn't see esoteric and authentic schools as competing with each other, because in the UGLE there's a strong bias among some Masons against the esoteric school. Sometimes because they don't understand what the school is for, right? Worshipful brother Baker highlights that, when you look at what these schools what their objectives are, okay, you can see that there's a lot of room from learning with each other. Here's something in the article that some miss, but which I want to highlight. He also wants to highlight that in the past several decades, there is actually even a potential, in his view, a third school, a growing body of Masonic writing that fits neither school, which is more personal and introspective, which applies the craft. Okay, and that has actually, from this old article, that is one of the first evidences. This is a bit back, this article, I think this is in the 1960s. That is one of the first evidence of recognition of the practical school of Masonic thought, which I belong to. I want to highlight that among Masonic writers, we tend to belong to one school, but that doesn't mean that we don't write articles that are in several. I'm going to actually give an example later of one. The very worshipful Alan Roberts. He's very well known as a writer in the authentic school, but his most popular work belongs to the mythical school, right? Why is this function important? Because if you don't have this function and you're just stuck in instruction, you will not make what we call a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. You will not be like these two exemplars of what it means to be a Mason. The point of being a Freemason is not that, you're gonna live a long life being a member of the Grand Lodge. It's supposed to be that at the end of your life, when you meet your maker, whatever your religion is, when you meet your maker, and that's to be a monotheistic God, okay? When you meet your maker, your brethren will say he was indeed a true Freemason. Sort of like these two here. Most worshipful former past Grand Master of Missouri, Harry Truman. When he was president, he would still visit lodges. And he would always highlight when he comes to the lodge, because nasashock yung master. Sometimes he just comes in, and there's with Secret Service agents in tow, right? He would request to be seated on the floor with the brethren, not because he wanted to de-emphasize the fact that he was president of the United States at the time he was visiting, but because he recognizes that in Freemasonry there is a place for everyone. And if you are a member, he was already a PGM, then your place is sitting in the floor among your brethren. Here we have many models of true Freemasons. I'm fortunate to have met, before he passed away, Most Worshipful Reynold Fajardo, the largest law firm in the country. Okay, the office providing legal aid to the government office, providing legal aid for many of those in our country who cannot afford legal services. He spent several decades building that, and he's also a very well-known Masonic writer, with a lot of books in his name, and the first one to be published in the leading journal of the Scottish Rite Research Society, Heredom. Okay, so what got them to be model Masons? They thought about the practical aspects of the liturgy. They thought about what it means to practice the ideals and lessons of the craft every day. If we don't emphasize that, it's just going to end up us using it when we do conferral work. And, it's as if we didn't even join the fraternity. So introspection involves that, if you can see the purple, the definition in purple, using the teachings of the craft to advance daily and become a better man. That's different from instruction. Instruction is providing a defined body of knowledge. Here, our philosophy through an engaging learning experience. Engaging, if you're a lecturer na napaka-boring mo kung parang monotone ang gawa mo, hindi yun engaging. Okay? So, after instruction, you must apply it. Okay? We're not even into Masonic writing yet. Right? Okay, now we will. Now we will come into Masonic writing. Masonic scholarship is also about institutionalization. We are the world's most oldest, essentially, the way we phrase it, the most ancient fraternity, philosophical fraternity of men seeking to mentor each other so that they can be better. So integration is not about creating new work. Okay? Integration is about facilitating dialogue to produce meaningful insights consistently over time so that this can become accepted traditions. Okay? What does that mean? What I am doing now, brethren, is not investigation. What I'm doing now, presenting this lecture, is part of the integration function. I am simply gathering material that is already available and presenting this to you. There's a place for that. Because if you just create new work and nobody reads it naman, what's the point of being a Masonic writer? You're not contributing to your fellow brethren. It's important that we disseminate our works. Okay? And that's Nathan Bindel is the secretary of another organization I'm going to recommend to you later. In the US, it's called the Masonic Society. And he highlights, look, the reason why they formed the Masonic Society was to make sure you got all these good articles that Freemasons can read. And many of them do not provide something that's truly new. Okay? They repackage, they resummarize, they synthesize material that is there so that we can do better introspection, so that we can do better instruction, right? So now you go really into writing. And that often will involve clarifying or correcting things that are not hindi pala Masonic, that are not supposed to be, that are not truly part of our philosophy. Okay? What do I mean? Well, for once, you see this hand on over the heart. Okay? Many Masons do that. You're not gonna. This is not really. Prevalent now because it has been cut back. But there was a time when there were actually some Masons questioning why we're doing that whenever we pray, right? Because there's nothing in the liturgy that highlights that that's how we pray. Well, in the first place, our philosophy does not dictate the form for you to pray. So, if brethren over time have come to accept that as their form of praying, you cannot prohibit that and say it's not part of Freemasonry. Okay, so that has been corrected, and that's why we see many brethren now, even in a non-Masonic function, you can identify them because they pray that way. Okay, so Freemasonry that is not meaningful and is not a genuine application of the craft. Okay, if it's not meaningful to brethren or it's not a genuine application of the craft, you should correct or you should clarify. Like in this case, if you end up if that opinion ended up prohibiting brethren from praying that way, you effectively are interfering with their religious life, which Freemasonry cannot intervene in. Okay, so that's why it was clarified in the middle, in the earlier part of this decade. Okay. Now, of course, integration requires that you be critical. Remember, see this one. The real test of Masonic scholarship is critical consideration. You can say that's correct because when you're in the function that's called integration, you have to make sure that you don't believe everything that's outside, that's there on the internet, because anybody can post anything, and that's another, as we highlighted in last month, that's another source of fake news. Okay, somebody, you have some, ignorant outsider say, I did a research on the internet, and what he has is, some crazy conspiracy theory that clearly is not credible. Okay. Another way of not being critical is if you simply recycle material without asking, is this really appropriate? Okay, without checking yourself that it indeed conforms to what we should teach about our philosophy. Okay, or if you simply instruct or recite ritual, that is actually not correct. Okay, when you do that, you are doing a disservice to the craft. What's an example of that? When you're instructing material that's actually not in the liturgy. Well, this is a common point of reference for us who are in the core of grand lectures. Okay, and it happens many times when you're exemplifying the work, when you're supervising lodges of instruction. Inevitably, you end up having and worshipful master sometimes when they get to that portion of after the obligation, they get to a portion where they explain certain the process to the one who is going through the degree, the candidate. Okay, and what the candidate hears sometimes, and this happens also during rehearsals, is the worshipful master saying the word etc. I am not joking. Okay, so the one, if it were not a lodge of instruction, if you're actually doing a conferral, the one it sticks in that person's mind. What is etc.? Okay, what does he mean by etc.? Right, etc. in Latin means and the rest. Okay, now as you know, if you have to perform the liturgy, you have to do it precisely. You have to do the words precisely. So I can tell you now, in our ritual, we have a copy here. In our rituals, okay, our monitor, there's no word there that says etc. Okay. As a matter of fact, there was a mistake we did when we were editing the Centennial Monitor. We did find a mistake. We corrected that. Why? Because you're supposed to repeat. Okay, and to repeat the words as is, in order for the candidate to focus on hearing the repetition. Okay. Here's the thing. How did etc. end up getting performed in some conferrals? Well, I'll tell you. It's in it ends up getting done in the first, second, and third degree because we traced it. We actually traced it, and it comes out that when you hit the penalty, when you describe conceptually what the penalty is for not following symbolically the obligation, that's when you get some masters, worshipful masters, or those performing in their stead, the word etc. So we did a little investigation a few years back on where this was, and we found out that in some decoded monitors which are not authorized, you cannot use them. We found out that the word etc. is placed there after the words for the penalty. What the author probably meant was you just repeat it, what you highlight, the penalty as you recited earlier. But for those who don't really know that etc. means and the rest, it's Latin for and the rest, they just end up saying etc. That's why there's another definition for etc. resulting from this brouhaha, and that is the end of thinking capacity. Okay, you're not supposed to say etc. when you do a conferral. Okay, how did that crop in? Because maybe the one decoding, that unauthorized decoding of our ritual, put etc. And if you're reading it and memorizing it and not being critical, you end up saying to all the brethren, etc. And they're going to wonder, is that part of the ritual? There you go. Okay, so now, moral of the story, be careful of unauthorized decoding of a ritual. Okay, you never know what's in there that might embarrass you. Okay, so that's Masonic scholarship as institutionalization. You make sure that all of this scholarship, all of this writing, all of this instruction is brought to brethren in an accessible manner. If you do that, performing a literature review of what you have and bringing it, summarizing it, okay, and here you do have to write. Okay, if you do that, then you're best prepared to do investigation. So let me have a recap. Let's do a recap, brethren. Okay, what are the 4 functions again? Start at the bottom. Instruction. What do we do when we do as Masonic scholars? What do we do when we do the core function of instruction? we ask this question: how do we best learn about the craft? Okay? How do we best learn about the craft? And you do that, as an example, by providing exemplary conferral work, the way Very Worshipful Louis does in IMES, by teaching and rehearsing Masonic liturgy orally. Okay? You might never have written anything, but like the great Muslim scholars of the first Muslim universities who memorized the Quran, like them, you are just as much a Masonic scholar, because our philosophy begins and blossoms with our liturgy, with our rituals. Of course, it doesn't end there. Okay? But I want to highlight, in this function, the school best suited to do this, of course, is the descriptive mystical school, that is the mythical school of thought. Why? Because they are the ones that highlight, best exemplify what should be highlighted in the ritual. And that is why, that school has become popular for those who are ritualists. Okay, but here's the thing: it shouldn't end there, right? But that's the foundation. But you have to move on. You have to also perform the function of introspection. And here your question is not that you know the liturgy well, because you should already know that, but how do you apply the craft to better yourself? How do you apply the craft to better yourself? Okay, so what is an example of that? You when you mentor someone, when you present on how you do a Masonic education that focuses on your experience. If you notice, brethren, assuming this is done properly during this extended term, we have moved away from lecturers simply reading like lectors. Okay, we have purposely emphasized them highlighting how Masonic lessons affect their lives. In short, they have to do some work in actually providing that. That is us promoting this core function of introspection. Okay, so when you hear a Masonic lecturer following the guidelines set by the Grand Lodge that you shouldn't just be reading, you should be highlighting how it impacted your life, that lecturer is doing introspection. That lecturer is highlighting how Freemasonry applies to him. So that is the point why every month we have the Grand Lodge monthly education topic, so that we can do this introspection, so that brethren, after their stated meeting, can further reflect. Okay? Can further reflect. The school that best pushes this is the one where I'm primarily at. That's the practical school. Okay? If you don't have this, there's going to be a disconnect. There's going to be a disconnect because, you're just going to end up with liturgy that you don't apply outside of the lodge, and it will not therefore have much value to you. But if you do this, then you get to understand. You get to build comprehension of what the liturgy is. And actually, you get better at instruction because of introspection. That will allow you to perform, therefore, the function of integration. The key question here is, how do we meaningfully organize what we know about the craft? This entire, if a lodge of instruction, okay, is an example of the core function of instruction, a lecture, a DGL doing a lodge of instruction, if that is a perfect example of instruction, and that same DGL, okay, performing or doing a presentation on the monthly Masonic education. This term we had the obligation and how it links to each other, right? That's an example of introspection. An example of integration is what all of you are experiencing these past 10 months. Everything that I've been doing is integration. Everything that I'm not presenting anything that's new, brethren. Everything that is in these lectures, you will find somewhere in our material, whether here and also some foreign sources. Like you'll see here, when we go to the third topic of this webinar, you will see that they're all foreign authors. Okay. So the point of integration is you designing, preparing, and delivering Masonic references and instructional materials so that brethren can be helped in terms of introspection and instruction. And sometimes this involves reviewing past materials. That is why a major significant achievement of Most Worshipful June this term is to put all the cable tow issues online. Because that way, integration, this core function of integration can be done. It's easier for you now to go through what our brethren said, for example, when it comes to specific topics like Jose Rizal and the myth, the myth of retraction, diba? Or how do we approach our most important philanthropy, which is public education. Okay, you go through past cable tow issues and you realize why that is our most important philanthropy, right? In addition to crippled children, which is highlighted by the Shriners and our other charities, right? You can do that because you have access to all these cable tow issues now for you to do Masonic secondary research. And clearly, the school that is the leading proponent of this is the Authentic School. Let me just highlight, I want to highlight that it can go to its extremes. There's been a lot of criticism about the Authentic School in that they often end up going into sometimes extremely trivial matters. Okay? There have been brethren who have come to be, have lost their enthusiasm if they're in a lodge that focuses on the Authentic School. Because, while it helps to go into and clarify Masonic history, if that history has no relevance to you, or if the secondary research into sources brings up something that is trivial, like all the 7 forms of Masonic aprons in the 1800s used by your lodge. Yeah, that's nice. But if you don't have, if it's not relevant to you, why use it, right? It's the same as highlighting research on our Masonic schisms. When brethren have left our fraternity thinking that they will be equally recognized, just so that you can highlight that maybe we should have several grand lodges here. Doesn't follow if you're into regular Freemasonry because of the doctrine of exclusive territorial jurisdiction. But if you want to go into the trivial details of the numerous feuds where brethren left our fraternity and them ending up getting disappointed, for some brethren, what's the point? So it can go to extremes. You shouldn't end up with trivia that only you are interested in. That's why what's in red there is important. It should be relevant. It should be meaningful to brethren when you do integration. Okay? So, finally, we go into investigation. And investigation is all about advancing or indeed truly increasing Masonic knowledge. For this, you must do original Masonic research and writing. Okay? And it requires major reflection. Now, I can tell you, of course, some of these four functions, they interact with each other. When I gather material to do this webinar, although primarily it's integration, some of it is really new. Like for example, I used my expertise in dispute resolution when we had to provide, uh, you know, when we explained our dispute resolution processes last January. So there you have an element of investigation. It's not, it's not what we think about yung in fiction, yung criminal investigation or Sherlock Holmes. No, investigation here is philosophical investigation. Okay, you go inside yourself and you end up creating new insights from what you know. The school, of course, that best expands this is esoteric school. Okay, and I want to highlight here, this is why many in the authentic school don't like those in the esoteric school. This is why many. Okay, why? Because like the authentic school, when it goes into extremes and researches trivial facts that are not really meaningful, the esoteric school can also go into extremes. How? They overextend their interpretation, or they go beyond what is acceptable for a secular practical philosophy like ours. And when they do that and it's not credible, it can be used by those who are ignorant of our philosophy or who have an agenda to try to, destroy our institution or whatever and twist it. Right? So, the esoteric school can also go into extremes. Now, my question to you, brethren, is at the bottom. What schools of Masonic thought do Masonic scholars focus in your grand jurisdiction? I'm talking about not just the Philippines here, but your own grand jurisdiction. If you are joining us in the morning, or the evening, or the afternoon from around the world now. Okay, and how has this impacted the exercise of the core functions in your locality? Why? Let me give you an example here in the Philippines. What do Masonic writers really do? Or when you think of people who really study the philosophy, what do they really do? The 100 that I'm talking about. Do they do all four? Or do we know them primarily to be doing investigation? Because here's the thing, if your Masonic scholars or the ones who are seriously studying Freemasonry in your grand jurisdiction are just focused on investigation, then there's very little scholarship that pushes the more basic functions. If all of you are into Masonic writing and there's no ritualist, you're going to have very few who will join you because your ritual will be bad. You don't have models preserving our oral traditions. If you have good ritualists but they stop there, okay, they don't explain that it can be applied every day, you don't have introspection. And if you don't continuously promote reading, writing, reflecting, summarizing, like what we're doing now, this webinar, okay, promoting these concepts, there's no integration. You might have very good Masons, model Masons, because they know the liturgy and they practice it, but they're not going to go into investigation because you don't synthesize the material that's already there. So, all four core functions are important. And that is why when you start out in Freemasonry and you want to really learn and get involved in the discipline, you have to realize that all these four functions come in stages. Effectively, this is how you climb your own Masonic Mount Herodom. This is your lifetime learning plan. If you want to be a serious student of Freemasonry, start first with making sure you are truly proficient in our liturgy. And for that, For that, the best way to learn that is to do conferrals, to attend lodges of instructions, because this is not in writing. We are inherently an organization that has a strong oral tradition, and our instruction is primarily oral. So, do conferrals, okay? Attend lodges of instruction. See what's right, because from there, that's your basis for reflection, for applying the lessons of that ritual every day. And when you apply it every day, it becomes a virtuous cycle, because you remember more and more, because the ritual will have more meaning to you. So after instruction, continuous reflection. And how is that done? We're going to go into 2 books on how to do that, okay, for you to consider. Okay, it becomes a virtuous circle. The more you understand the liturgy because you apply it in your daily life, the more it comes automatic to you when you do a conferral or you attend the lodge of instruction. And from that basis, okay, then you can broaden your horizons. Then you can go into integration, primarily by reading broadly and critically. Okay, your first efforts, I should recommend, if you're going to do your first paper, it shouldn't be anything original. It should be you trying to synthesize, trying to summarize previous contributions by other Masonic students. And here's what I want to ask. For those of us in the Philippines, I'll do it in our local language. Ginagawa ba natin to? Maybe it's because we don't highlight it, that we have a very small core of people who are at the top, who are doing investigation. Kasi sila lang ang natapos itong 4. If we don't prioritize this way, maybe that's the reason why napaka-konti, or in the English, that's the reason why there are so few, relatively few Masonic writers today. Because many of us just stopped at our proficiency exam instruction. But I can tell you, brethren, if you follow this, the doors for you becoming a better man, intellectually, ethically, and socially, there's no end to the doors that can open in Freemasonry. Okay, so let's now go to poll 2, Kuya Dennis, as we go to our second topic for this evening.
Okay.
What's poll 2? We're now going back to revisiting the 4 major schools of Masonic thought. And now we're going to go deeper. We're going to give examples later on. But first, let's figure out if you remember those 4 schools. How are the 4 major schools of Masonic thought categorized, brethren and guests? If for those of you who did not attend the first lecture on philosophy last October, you can take a good guess. But for those of you attended, here's a way to refresh yourself. How they categorize? On one hand, prescriptive rational, and on the other, descriptive mystical? Or is it on one hand, prescriptive mystical, and the other, descriptive rational? Or is it prescriptive descriptive and mystical rational? Or baka nga binobola tayo. Baka it's really mysterious, magical, methodical, or moral. Kuya Dennis, let's see how our brethren and guests in the webinar are taking this up. In the meantime, while you're answering, you might wonder, I earlier highlighted Brother Nathan Bindel. Very wishful. Nathan Bindel is the secretary of the Masonic Society. That is the leading learned society, most popular actually, learned society in the US now, of Masons who are, and they primarily form the integrative function. But you'll also see a lot of original articles there that are basically, truly philosophical investigation, new work. But primarily it was formed to propagate more Masonic education, and they have very good journals. Their journal Their magazine is top-notch, very easy to understand, very easy to go through, well worth subscribing to. How do you subscribe? The link is there. Okay, so that's the second. The first one, Katur Karonati, if you really want to go into historical research, okay, the Authentic School, they are the premier Grand Lodge in the world, the premier lodge of research in the world, premier, and they are the foremost proponent of Masonic of the school of Authentic School. The Masonic Society, they take all, they take all schools. There's a bias towards the practical and authentic side, but you see all writing from all perspectives, and that's why they're so popular. They have more members than what the Kotor Coronati calls it is their correspondent circle. They have more members because it helps Masons live Masonically every day when they get materials from the Masonic Society. So now we're at 50%, Kuya Dennis. What say you? We have 2 more minutes? Or did you close the poll? Okay. So Kuya Dennis has closed the poll. And here are the poll results. Okay. Let's go with the clearly long answer. There is no such thing as a magical school. If you think that there is a magical school of Freemasonry, you're actually in the wrong organization. I can direct you to another organization of fiction writers, but we are not that. Okay, so D is clearly wrong, brethren and guests. Okay, what about A, prescriptive rational versus descriptive mystical? Clearly, that's wrong also, because there you're talking of the difference between you're saying that the opposite of prescriptive is rational, when actually there's no conflict to have both. So in that regard, unfortunately, B is also problematic. Okay, why is B problematic? Because you can prescribe what you think should be your way of action because it's a practical philosophy and still have a mystical background. The best example of that is the esoterical school, right? So what is the correct answer? The correct answer is C. Why? Okay, we'll go into why C is the correct answer when we review these 4 schools and how they're organized. And after that, let me give you recommendations if you're starting out with your Masonic library. But first, let's go back. But first, why is it C, prescriptive descriptive versus mystical rational? I want to jump first into the okay. Let me jump first into this diagram of the respective schools. As I highlighted, the distinction is between prescriptive, descriptive, and mystical rational. Note what we're talking about. Okay, when you talk about prescriptive, where my arrow is, or descriptive, you're talking about approach. Okay, you're talking about approach. The descriptive schools, these 2 here, they have a descriptive perspective because they just primarily describe the material so you can better learn it or to establish what the facts are. The schools who are prescriptive, however, don't just describe. I want to highlight that. They do not just describe. They say you should use your philosophy this way. So one categorization is whether it's descriptive or prescriptive. Is it just seeking to describe the content, or is it prescribing a course of action, an ideal course of action? That's one category. And that's why in C, we have the other category, mystical versus rational. Here, we're not talking of approach. We're talking of context. What does context mean? What do you want to really emphasize? Do you want to emphasize a reason, reason and critical thinking in your approach? Or do you want to emphasize imagination? Do you want to emphasize creativity? So, unlike descriptive and prescriptive, okay, where you're looking at, are you describing the material or you're prescribing a course of action? In mystical and rational, in terms of context, you should be asking yourself, is this school emphasizing reason or is it emphasizing creativity? And I want to emphasize that. That's why C is correct, because that gets you to distinguish between the four schools. If you emphasize reason and you emphasize describing the content, that's the authentic school. Here, ethics as epistemology. What do we know? A reasonable approach based on critical thinking to describing content. What you research as fact. What do we know? Eto naman. If you're describing the content so that you're instructing, so that you can best instruct it, but you want to highlight it in terms of the values you want to champion. Ayan, that is the mythical school. Remember, you're not using reason, you're not being primarily rational. You're looking at creativity and description. How do you use symbols? How do you use beauty? How do you use order, harmony? How do you use your mind to creatively teach the core lessons of Freemasonry? Ayan, mythical school. So here, okay, in mythical school, what you're highlighting is what should we champion? What should we prioritize in teaching? Okay, so whether it's authentic or mythical, you're doing a descriptive approach. Except in the authentic school, dapat it should really be a fact. It should be proven by a credible source that, indeed, the term Freemason originated from, that sort of stuff. In mythical school, you're not saying that facts are wrong. No, you're saying we want to highlight more symbols. We want to highlight more, learning. And how do we do that? Okay, we look at, how we can arrange or form the material so that you can best remember and comprehend it. So here, unlike authentic, which is ethics as epistemology, the branch of philosophy that asks what you know, the mythical school is really ethics as aesthetics. Aesthetics is the branch of philosophy that focuses on what is beautiful. So you can highlight that that's what they're doing here. What should we champion? What should be important when we teach the initiatic experience? And in both cases, they're just being descriptive. That's the difference between the schools here at the bottom and the schools on top. The school where I'm a primary student of is a school that emphasizes a rational approach using reason, okay, in highlighting that Freemasonry should be meaningful. We should apply it in our lives because that's the point of being a Freemason. That at the end of our life, we truly became better men. That is why the practical approach here on this side is essentially all about how do you make the lessons of Freemasonry meaningful in your everyday life. Now, that is a branch of philosophy called ethics. Okay, that's ethics through logic. Why? You're trying to apply with introspection primarily the lessons of Freemasonry so that it becomes relevant to you. And you can best do that by being a rational individual. Now, clearly, that's not the only way of becoming better at Freemasonry, right? There's another way of saying this is how you should apply the philosophy. Oh, so if you're very Reverend Vic Chin, then you would probably belong to the esoteric school. Okay? What is the esoteric school? The esoteric school seeks to ask the biggest questions. Not really how we can be, not just how we can be a better person, but really, why are we here? What's the goal of life? And maybe by asking the ultimate questions, we can better ourselves. So unlike the practical school, which is ethics through logic, esoteric school is really ethics as metaphysics. Okay, it seeks to ask, what are the ultimate questions? Why are we here? Now, of course, all of these schools, they have critics. In my school, right? It's the practical school. There are, of course, those who think that what we're doing is shallow. That's because they haven't been, these are primarily outsiders. They don't know what it means to really engage in the material. They're critics of the authentic school because many of those in the authentic school, they go into really trivial stuff na you don't really need to know all the dates there are in Freemasonry. But that's been a criticism of the school. In the mythical school, if you can overdo it. You can claim that there's a historical connection between the knights, the orders of knighthood that we have in the York Rite, with the orders of knighthood during the chivalric era. That's clearly wrong. There's no historical connection, so you can overdo it. Same with esoteric. If you get into material that nobody can understand, okay, that is too speculative, you'll have people from the authentic school saying, this is why we get into trouble. Okay, so you have to be careful. You have to make sure that your material is understandable. So that is why there are two ways of categorizing the schools. By approach, is it prescriptive? Okay, how should you apply the philosophy? Or is it descriptive? What do we know? How can you learn it? Is it, and then you have to look the other category. Is it context? Okay, do you emphasize reason or creativity, or more accurately, more specifically, imagination? Okay, so if you understand those two categorizations, then you can see why those schools are where they are today. For a long time, it was a battle between the esoteric and the authentic school. But now, especially since the 1970s, there have been more and more of those who write on the side of the practical school. And the mythical school has come to be distinguished from esoteric in terms of its objective, which is to highlight how you can best learn the material, not by what is really, what you're trying to really aim for, the main themes in that life should have. Okay, so mythical gradually ended up being distinguished from esoteric, and practitioners gradually produced more practical works, which we'll see later. And that is why we have the four major schools or primary schools of Masonic thought today. You've already seen this in October. Okay, I want to highlight again, Masonic philosophy is applied in a secular fashion. It is not a religion. As Most Worshipful Danny Angles, our current Grand Secretary and past Grand Master, likes to highlight, there is no salvation in Freemasonry. We are not a religion, and anybody who tries to highlight that has no idea what he or she is talking about. Okay? So, why? Because it's not dogmatic. We have uniform principles, but interpretations may vary precisely because it's a philosophy where you interpret. The interpretation that should prevail is, as I'm highlighting here, in any application conduct, is that which appears to be the most rational and or credible. So sometimes it's not rational, it's more as a result of the creative function given the circumstances. So, just to recap, what are the four schools? Esoteric, Masonic thought as a gateway to the subconscious self and contemplation of the meaning of life. Okay? Descriptive and creative. Mythical. I'm sorry, esoteric is prescriptive, course of action, and creative, right? Mystical. Mythical is Masonic thought as a facility for values promotion, particularly through narrative legends. So, descriptive, promoting values, descriptive, okay, but primarily from the side of imagination and creativity, the mystical side. Then we go to the models that promote rational thought, the oldest of which is the authentic. Okay, authentic school, Masonic thought founded on demonstrated historical evidence. Okay, so reason and factual, right? And then the practical school, reason as logic. Masonic thought that leverages the fraternity's operative foundations for character and nation building. I hope if it did not sink in last time, because I got a lot of questions on this after, it sinks in now. Okay? But let me give you two contexts for it to better sink in. This one, we already had in October. How does this work in practice? Well, let's look at a historical fact and narrative, an example from historical fact and narrative fiction. What is historical fact? The Knights Templars were a historical fact. What are the questions that a Masonic scholar will ask if he is going to research or write an article or instruct about the Knights Templar? Well, somebody from the esoteric school will ask, what does their historical experience tell us about who we are, about what we can be? Chivalry, right? About how we can demonstrate our humanity. That's the esoteric school. If you're like me from the practical school, the most important question for me would be, given their historical their story, okay, history as demonstrated by historical fact, how can we model our behavior to be like their good traits? What can we learn from them to be better men today? The historical authentic school, however, will really look at what's the relationship, historical and or symbolic, what relationship factually exists between the Knights Templars and Freemasonry. Let's stick with the facts. What factually exists? Okay, and what isn't? Because if it's not, we shouldn't be propagating it. Okay, you guys in the mythical and esoteric school, if it's not, do not confuse people. So that's the authentic school. The mythical school will instead ask, okay, there is some fact there and some is legend. That's not a problem with us. Okay, what we want to highlight, if you're in the mythical school, is how do we best commemorate their story? How do we best champion the ideals that they focused on? That's why in the York Rite, if you really move up to the Templar degrees, you have to be a Christian Freemason. Okay, that's because of the influence of the mythical school. So that's a historical fact. Or let's go to something out of pure fiction. Star Wars. For those of us who grew up on Star Wars. Okay, if you're too young for this, sorry na lang. Okay, I don't want to do something like I'm not in a position to do something that's more popular. But this was what was popular in my time. Star Wars. Okay, let's look at the Jedi Order. It's total fiction. Okay, total fiction, but very, very similar to what we do in Freemasonry, right? So if you're going to do an article on what relationship that fictional account has to us, and you focus on the Jedi Order, if you're in the esoteric school, you're going to ask, in George Lucas's description of the Jedi Order in the story, okay, how does that narrative fit in exemplifying what is important about being human? Okay, what does the Jedi Order teach us about ourselves? Eh kung ako, if I'm from the more practical perspective, say, teka lang, baka mamaya masyadong abstract yan. Maybe that's too abstract. You know what? I want to look at how does George Lucas in his story, okay, he's the creator of Star Wars. How does the story highlight Masonic values and best practices? Because if you can see that there are some values there and practices that are exemplified which are similar to ours, like the initiatic experience, training a Padawan to become a Jedi, the order being governed by a Grandmaster. Hey, we can use that, okay, to exemplify best practices. So that's what I'd be looking at. The authentic school, however, will focus on reason. You know, what themes in the narrative are consistent, are really consistent with our values and practices, and where can we say that they are divergent? So there it's going to look. This is what the account says, and this is what we are, which is true and which is not. That's what the authentic school. And then, of course, the mythical school, I guess you know by now, what's the best way to link this great story, okay, to what we do, to how we teach our philosophy, okay? If you're the mythical school, you'll have that book called the Jedi Order that describes the training of a Jedi Knight, and then that's what you use in a petitioner. You know, in the same way that a Padawan, blah blah blah. Is it accurate? Authentic school might be worried about doing it, but it's the best way for you to teach somebody who is a fan of Star Wars into the details of our philosophy. Okay, so that's what we learned last October. Let me focus on something new here. Okay, please note that, as I highlighted earlier, you can be a proponent of one of these schools, but you often are you can have material that works in several. For example, as you'll see later, this guy, the guy at the bottom there, not President Truman, that other guy, okay, that he's very worshipful, Alan Roberts. His book Freemasonry in American History is a classic example of the authentic school. But in addition to that, Alan Roberts is also a great mythical writer. His best work, his most popular work, you can buy it here, okay, in GLP, is The Craft and Its Symbols. Okay, we're going to go into that later. So there, he teaches what the symbols mean, not from a historical perspective, but from a teaching perspective. Okay, so in this slide, I want to highlight, what do facts mean to these schools? And with that, I have an important, with that first caveat that you can borrow and you can cross schools. I have a second caveat. Okay, there is no such thing as quote unquote alternative facts in Freemasonry. A fact is a fact. Okay, and if it happened, it happened. You're not supposed to tamper with what is factually correct as long as you can prove it. If there's some dispute, well, it's a quest for you to look for more sources, but there is no such thing as alternative fact in Freemasonry. Okay, so with that in mind, how do the four schools, okay, credibly present facts? Okay, we all know on this extreme side, the authentic school, it's really about this question: what can you prove? You must rely on the facts you can prove, period. There's a danger there. Baka mamaya masyadong trivial. But that's the point. You must rely on the facts you can prove. And that is why that school, their favored setting is, England, where in 1717, the United Grand Lodge was, what would become the United Grand Lodge was organized. They highlight, historical facts which have come to demonstrate the link of the fraternity to important social events like this guy. That's George Washington laying the cornerstone of the United States Capitol. That is historic fact. Okay, and that is why, if you're in the authentic school, it's a very clear standard. Okay, those of us in the practical school do also ask is, teka lang, you have to be meaningful. Diba? You don't want to have this is a history of the 17 kinds of gavels that this lodge used over the course of 56 years. What's that got to do with Freemasonry? Okay? So in the practical school, our main focus is emphasizing the facts that make your point. You cannot lie, you cannot deceive, but you can prioritize the facts that make your point. Okay? So that is why the setting here is whether if you're in America, you're going to focus that Freemasonry is linked to patriotism. If you're in the Philippines, my local context, you're going to focus that there would not be a Filipino nation without Freemasonry. That's the quote of Aguinaldo, worshipful brother Aguinaldo down there. There would not be a country without Freemasonry. And if you want to know more about that, we had that last June. I'm going to repeat that presentation on Freemasonry being Filipino before an international audience. This I think March 30 before the Hope Lodge of Kurachi. You can look up their Facebook page for the schedule of that. So if you want to go into why the Filipino nation is founded on Masonic principles, catch that March 30 or April 1. It's going to be in the Facebook page of the Hope Lodge of Kurachi. So you can see, okay, practical and authentic, where it's a rational context that we're looking at. We often borrow from each other. It's really a difference of what we want to emphasize. Okay, that's different from the other side, the other two schools, which focus not on reason but imagination. There's nothing wrong with imagination. There's nothing wrong with creativity. Okay, what's wrong is when you deceive. Okay, hindi na imagination yun, hindi na creativity yun. Okay, that's being deceptive. That's not being that's unmasonic conduct. Okay, so mythical and esoteric. Okay, they take the context is one that highlights imagination and creativity, and the perspective of the more extreme, the other side of authentic, the traditionally the other side of authentic, which is esoteric school, is making the most of being human. Not really, questions like how many gavels did the lodge have, or what are the kinds of aprons used by the Grand Lodge over the years. Okay, not really that, but what is making the most of being human? What does that mean? What is the ultimate question that should be? That's what's really should be. We should classify as most true, and that is why it can get really deep. The discussion can get really deep. Just be careful, okay? Just be careful that it doesn't go beyond. There are some proponents of the school. They're also involved in theosophy. Okay, there are some elements of Freemasonry we can say are compatible with theosophy, but theosophy is not Freemasonry. Okay, so what is the favored setting of those in the esoteric school? As you can see, it's Greek and Roman myths. It's Jewish religious thought. Everything that tries to go and truly extend the minds of a person in really understanding what it means to be human. What you see here is the Kabbalah, the tree of life in Jewish religious thought. The academic study of the tree of life does not make Freemasonry a part of Jewish religion. Okay, it's not. We're studying it to see how we can the Kabbalah as a Jewish tree of life can better explain our context as human. And if we don't find it credible, we don't find it credible. If you find it credible, then that can help us in our understanding. The Greek and Roman myths, okay, in the sense that it fostered classical thought. You see there the pantheon of Athens. Okay, that is a favorite topic in the esoteric school. Also, Egyptian myths, by the way. Okay, so that focus on what is most important differentiates the esoteric school from our last school, which is the mythical school. And the question that the mythical school seeks to highlight is meaning over details. You get that phrase, you can't go wrong. And I have many local brethren in the York Rite who are flat out traditional mythical school, because they focus on the meaning rather than factual details in trying to symbolize best channel Masonic thought in terms of symbolism and allegory. That is why the proponents of this school, their favorite context is the Crusades, because chivalry has this romantic notion of you dedicating yourself to God, greater ideals, manly ideals. That's what you have there. Now, take note, when you're in the mythical school, you're not saying that we historically are connected to the Knights Templar, because you're not here in the authentic school. Okay, you are saying we are studying the Crusades because they teach us something about being good. And remember, it's a descriptive school. A descriptive school like authentic. Unlike authentic, which focuses on the facts, a descriptive school that focuses on the facts, that's authentic school. The prescriptive school focuses on describing properly the meaning of Freemasonry. Meaning over details. Okay, you cannot, be deceptive. But if you highlight that, you're focused more on meaning, then, we will have a credible presentation, even though it's not really anchored on what the authentic school wants. There has been some, those in the authentic school says that they are the one and only. There are some, not, there's a determined minority who says that practical, esoteric, and mythical, wala yan, because it's only true Masonic research is only about the facts. I want to highlight here that if that's your approach, nobody much will do Masonic research. Nobody much will really want to go into, here is my paper on the 17 kinds of gavels that the lodge in its 200-year history use. Yeah, that's nice to know. But if you keep doing that, that's not a full life. Okay, so that's my criticism of those who think that the authentic school is the only school that is worth being in Masonic research. Okay, now a final point here. You might ask, great, I like this description, but does this really work out in practice? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's say hypothetically, you were today going to look for just 8 books, two books per school to start out your Masonic library. Okay? Let's say you want to start out, having learned this, you want to start out and say what, not just 1 book, but 2 books per school will best teach you about that perspective. Oh, so that's what we're going to go into now. Let's start with the mythical school. Okay, why? Why is it best to start out with the mythical school? Remember, the mythical school is the school best positioned to promote the first core function of instruction. And if there is one book you should start out with between these two, it is The Craft and Its Symbols. This is my Lolo's copy. Most Worshipful Teodoro Calao Jr., this is his copy of Craft and Its Symbols. And when I have a confession to make to all my brethren. When I was 14 years old. That's when I first saw this in his desk. He keeps this in his desk. And you can see that, well, you can't see it here, but it's very daming notes and maraming highlighters. And I could not understand the thing because I was 14 years old. But after going through with my brethren in my mother lodge, 136, Theodore M. Kalau, 136, after going through, and I have to confess, wow, they did it very well. The symbolism that I learned, you cannot get a better explanation for that with Alan Roberts. He's primarily an authentic school writer, but this is his most popular work. And this description here of the second degree, what we take up, I obviously cannot go into it in detail because there are non-Masons here. But if you enter our fraternity, the symbolism that is here, you will find in the second degree, the winding staircase. He has the best explanation. I suggest to lodges, in addition to the kit that you give your brethren, will not hurt if you give them also this, the craft and its symbol. And ironically, here's what's nice about this book. It's been around since 1974. That shows the enduring and timeless value of our lessons. Now, you want to go in deeper. This is out of print, but you can still get copies because it's, I understand, in the public domain. You can try to get copies on the internet. I understand it's already in the public domain. The Builders, a story and study of Masonry by the late Joseph Newton Comfort. This is, again, it highlights, how timeless these pieces are. This was done in the 1920s, but don't worry, it's not as esoteric as some, it's not as deep as some esoteric writers. Okay, it teaches you what are the core foundations of our traditions. Okay, then it goes through a description of the development of our fraternity. Note that phrase, through the ages. That's code. That's code to mean that it's not all. It will not all be deemed credible by the authentic school. But that's not his point. His point is to provide a compelling story as to why our philosophy is the way it is. Okay, so that leads us to his primary point, his conclusions, his concluding chapters on what really are the core principles of Masonic philosophy. It's a great book. It's much longer than The Craft and Its Symbols, but okay, it has many gems that you can quote. Okay, that if you quote, okay, yung brethren mo masabi, wow, ang galing-galing ni Very Worshipful Teddy. Yung pala, you're just quoting Joseph Newton Comfort. Okay, like this quote here. This quote is from the book. We cannot tell what may happen to us in the strange medley of life, but we can decide what happens in us, how we can take it, what we do with it. And that is what really counts in the end. Memorize that. Tapos, if you're a worshipful master, at the right moment, you'll find it. You hear it like that. And the brothers will like, wow! Of course, you have to highlight that it's not you. It's from, worshipful brother Joseph Newton Comfort. Okay? A lot of gems in that work. So, in the mythical school, you cannot go wrong. Builders and Craft and Its Symbols. Okay? Let's go to my school. Here, there's very little materials locally. So I suggest if you really want to get into it, you take the effort to get this from abroad because we're still developing the school in the country. And there may be local Masons, local brethren who will disagree with me, but I think, I will say it now, I think one reason why we don't have more writers than we should have is because this is the school that highlights the second core function, introspection. We don't make it meaningful and relevant, what we teach to our brethren who are proficient in the liturgy. So they don't apply it in their daily life. There's no virtuous circle. They don't want to learn anymore. But if you want like me, want to highlight that, there's something more to this, there's something, bigger to being a Mason, then you can't go wrong with these two books. The first one is Contemplative Masonry. You can actually find both on Amazon and other online bookstores. C.R. Dunning, that actually is from an earlier work in the late 1990s. That was he was anonymous then, but it was so widely circulated that he developed it into his own book. And basically, Contemplative Masonry, the basic application of mindfulness, meditation, and imagery for the craft, seeks to extend our teachings to practicing Freemasonry on a daily basis. And for that, he goes into understanding the psychology of the Masonic mind. Okay, and then he highlights that even in the esoteric school, it has a practical perspective that we can use. And how do we do that? He goes through the lessons of the 3 degrees. What are the inner workings of Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason? And how can you apply this daily? Particularly through being mindful. Okay? Particularly through meditation and mental imagery. Make yourself a better person. If you can get that, or there's an earlier. It's also on the internet. There's an earlier work by him, even though he's not credited by author. The earlier work, he developed it into this book, Contemplative Masonry. Then, of course, you cannot go wrong with. I'm sad to report, brethren, that this year we lost a great Masonic luminary and very worshipful W. Kirk McNulty. He just passed away this year. I don't think it's because of COVID, but he was pretty senior already. But if in the US, among Masonic writers, and in the United Kingdom, he is a giant. He is a giant among giants. Okay? If you can get all of his works, wow, there's so much in them. Okay? But if there's one work that you want to start out with, it's this. Contemplating Craft Masonry, Working the Way of the Craftsman. Please note, even though they both use the word contemplating, they have very different approaches. Okay, so with Kirk, it's more with Very Worshipful McNulty, it's more traditional philosophical investigation, what we call phenomenology for those of you who are Ateneans. Okay, philosophical internal introspection, and that to him is the essence, fundamentally the essence of craft masonry. Learning every day how you practice the way, what he calls the way, the teachings in the Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason degrees. Okay, and more just as significant, the fact that the lodge, we do this through a lodge. You know the traditional concept of lodge, the gathering of brethren. We do this with our peers. We mentor each other. Okay, so with him, and you're not going to find too much about mindfulness, meditation, or mental imagery. Okay, if you have a philosophical, if your major in college was philosophy, he's more into phenomenology. Okay, philosophical introspection, finding the way using the philosophical teachings of our craft. It's a very comprehensive examination. If you're gonna start out with, he has a lot of books. If you're gonna start out with one, start out with this. This is the school where I'm primarily in. Okay, if you want to be like a Very Worshipful Harold, or very Reverend Sammy Fernandez, okay, then you are what we call the authentics. The authentic school. Okay, they focus on what are the facts. Okay, and how are we as an international institution? I think the most classical one, it's being reprinted because the latest version is from the 1950s. Okay, the classical example, I think the best, the most readily the most readable of the classic text to me is Freemason's Guide and Compendium. Bernard Jones was a luminary in Ars Quatuor Coronatum, and he has a very comprehensive treatment of, in particular, English Freemasonry as an institution and its core precepts. He starts out with historically how the craft originated in operative Masonry and how it transitioned into speculative Freemasonry. And then he looked at the institution today, how it developed into the institution that it is, the United Grand Lodge of England, and then it goes into its core teachings. Unlike my school, it's all matter of fact. Okay, he says Lewis is a son, blah blah blah. Okay, he talks about these are what the appendant bodies teach. This is what our symbols mean. I mean, very plain English, very easy to understand. In short, just the facts. So there are other modern versions, like you'll see later. You'll have very worshipful Brent Morris's Freemasonry for Idiots, the Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry, or Freemasonry for Dummies. Okay, that's also good. That's by another skipped my mind. That's another well-known writer. Okay, you have that, but if I were you, I'd start with the classic, and this is a classic from the English side. I also want to highlight that you don't have to be a Freemason to be in this school. Jasper Ridley, the late Jasper Ridley, is a respected English historian, passed away in 2004, is not a Freemason. Jasper Ridley is not a Freemason. That is why you end up with this kind of title, A History of the World's Most Powerful Secret Society. I think that subtitle may have been put by his publisher, but if you were really a Freemason, you wouldn't put that. But that being the case, I think of all the historical works I've read, even this newest one, there's a new one that just was published. It's in black cover. Of all the historical works I've read, this is the best example of a general history of the fraternity by a non-Mason. And he gets a lot. As long as there's a credible source, he gets it right. Okay, so for me, it illustrates how the fraternity can be studied objectively because he bases it on primary and secondary historical sources. Like, for example, his argument that Freemasons, operative Freemasons, are called Freemasons because they dealt in free stone as against, for example, limestone. And he gives evidence for that. Whether that's the case, well, that's still subject to debate. But he gives evidence. He gives evidence. So you can. It's a story that is credible because he does it in a way that's not biased in favor of against Freemasonry, or that is not unduly favorable. Because you have to admit, okay, we might have that bias. If we love our fraternity so much, we could end up being a bit biased in judging how we present. That has been a criticism of the practical school, I must admit. Okay, so this is a historian who is as objective as you can get, and for that, very readable. You should get it. Okay, with one caveat. Remember, he's not a Mason. So when it comes to interpretation of Masonic concepts and principles, yung interpretation niya, I'm not saying it's wrong. You just be careful. Obviously, he has not gone through the experience. Obviously, whatever he writes about, he's just writing it based on written sources. Okay? And maybe oral interviews I didn't see, but primarily written sources. Okay. Unfortunately, he passed away also, 2004. So that was his last book, his last and only. That was one of his last books. I think this was 2002. And his only work actually in Freemasonry. Okay. So if you're very worshipful Harold or very reverend Sammy, this is your domain. Let me go to very worshipful Bicao Chin, our very worshipful Benny T, the esoteric school. What truly matters? The other three, at the end of the day, we will all meet our maker. What truly matters? For this, here are the two books I recommend. For the Craft, okay, there are several books. This is from the latter half of the 19th century. Okay, so it's really old, but it has been revised into modern English and expanded. If you get the book with this cover, okay, it's by the late worshipful brother Walter Wilmhurst. It has been expanded and revised by some editors. I would suggest you get that book, okay, and it gives, in my view, the most understandable, readable explanation for the initiatic experience. What I explained in November when I talked about the meaning of our rituals, there you go. A lot of that was from that book. Okay, so he highlights what it means to conceptually go from darkness to light, what it means as you're traveling through the 3 degrees, light, Masonic light in the 3 degrees, and what it means, what that light truly means fully. Of course, I can't go into it in detail because, that's for our members who go through it, right? But he gives the clearest, most understandable interpretation of what the initiatic experience means. Remember that our conferral work, what we teach through the initiatic experience. And basically that last part on the past and future of the Masonic order is really all about, we need to emphasize this, that our teachings inherently revolve around this initiatic experience. Okay. Among Scottish Rite Masons, everybody knows the late Rex Hutchins, okay, past Grand Master of Arizona, okay, and his most popular book, from where this chart is taken, this one, the chart here, from where that chart is taken, his most popular book is A Bridge to Light. If you're looking at my screen, this is the most current edition. And it's most popular because this is usually what's given now in lieu of Morals and Dogma of Albert Pike. Morals and Dogma was for many decades the basic text provided to Scottish Rite Masons in the southern jurisdiction, from which we in the Philippines, our own sovereign jurisdiction, originates or derives from. We were created by the southern jurisdiction. There are two jurisdictions in the United States. The thing with Morals and Dogma is that the words are very archaic. That's why a lot of very selfish and evil people with very bad interests, they like to quote from Morals and Dogma. Not because they don't understand it, but it's very easy to misinterpret that. So, most worshipful Hutchins has provided a modern interpretation with this book, and it's circulated. Okay? And the reason why this is circulated is that it explains each degree. Okay? It explains the 4th to the 33rd degree of the Scottish Light. Okay? That particular sub-branch, which we will talk about in our last episode next month. Okay? That's why this is distributed. It organizes the material by degree. This is not the book I'm recommending. You're going to get this anyway if you're Scottish Rite. Okay? Some brethren might take issue with me. That's okay. That's free to agree to disagree, right? But if I were you, if there is one work of Hutchins that you should read first, this is useful, right? The Bridge to Light, and you get this graphic from that book. This graphic is from that book, okay? But if there's the most valuable work I think he has in explaining the Scottish Rite system, which is esoteric in nature, is Pillars of Wisdom. Okay, what's the distinction between Bridge to Light and this? This is organized conceptually by theme, by concept. Okay, so he goes into the background, the context of the Scottish Rite, so that he can explain, so that he can go through each of the concepts together. So there are some, I'll be hypothetical because obviously I shouldn't go into what's private, no, but there are concepts in uh, all of the 4 branches of the Scottish Rite that are, that are repeated. Okay, there are concepts, right? What he does is, for this concept, he organizes it in one discussion, and then for this concept, he organizes it for that discussion. That's what we mean by foundations. Okay, that's what we mean by foundations. Okay, and then he goes further and has a separate discussion on the truly more esoteric themes that Pike got into, to make sure that he is understood today. Okay, he is understood today by Masons today. Very often, if somebody is misquoting Pike blatantly using morals and dogma, I don't use Bridge to Light. I use this. Okay, and for me, what I like about it is that it's organized but conceptually. So all the discussion on a specific concept is put together, not separated in several degrees. So Wilmhurst, to describe the initiatic experience, if you want to go to what is called the University of Freemasonry and join the Scottish Rite, cannot go wrong. You'll get a Bridge to Light, okay? But buy okay, Pillars of Wisdom. Same author, material explained differently and arranged differently, and in my view, in a better way. Okay, so we are now in our third topic. Before I get to that, we have our third poll question. Okay, which of the so now what have we shown so far? We've learned the 4 core functions of being a serious student of Freemasonry, right? Instruction, introspection, integration, investigation. And we've revisited the 4 schools of Masonic thought, right? Authentic, mythical, esoteric, practical. Okay? So with that in mind, you know the functions and you know the perspective. Now you can focus on process. Function, then perspective. Now we talk about process. So since we're going to talk about process, my last question for today is, which of the following factors has the greatest potential for making a Masonic topic interesting? Okay. Is it A, what I think? Or is it B, what he thinks? O malay mo, baka she, what she thinks. If it's a non-Mason or, a female Mason in a non-regular order writing about Freemasonry. Or C, what's new and original? Basta new and original. Or D, it depends on the context. What do you think? Kuya Dennis, let's have our last poll for today.
After nito, Kuya Teddy, magsusulat na ako.
Okay.
Para masama.
Well, that's what I hope. That's what I hope
masama.
many of our brethren will be in when they, not really writing, but really reading, because there's so much that is so interesting about our fraternity if we just cared to really reach out.
Yeah.
Okay. While you're doing that, this is the third. Okay, this is the third society that I think you should consider. It is the Scottish Rite Research Society. And contrary to what you might think, what's in their journal, Heredom, isn't just about matters concerning what the Scottish Rite studies. Okay? The reason why I highlight this is, unlike the first one, Quatur Coronati, which is the premier lodge of research,
Mhm.
the one where Kuyang Harold, and Kuya Sami would want to be in. Okay? And unlike the Masonic Society, for people like me, which is the most popular now in the US, if not the world, this is the most value. Okay? I'll tell you a little secret. They have a life membership for right now. It's, I think, $1,500. That's 75,000 pesos. If you're 25 or 30 years old, jackpot. You get that life membership, like I did. I got it when it was only $1,000, 50,000 pesos, 18 years ago. 18 or 19 years ago.
Malayo pa ako doon, Kuya Teddy.
2004, 2005. So mga 17 years ago, right? Shortly after I joined Freemasonry. And I have received their journal every time. So right now, I mean, sulit, super sulit ang ano ko, because I don't have to pay anything anymore. And every journal, the annual journal, and the 4 issues of their newsletter, jam-packed with very interesting stuff. It's, I think, the best value in Freemasonry today.
Sige.
Okay, so are we ready?
Okay, I'll end the poll now.
And so here is our last poll. So, what do you think? What I think? Well, clearly, or what he thinks, or what's your original? Clearly, you know, as most of you said, it depends. As we will see later. What you think is interesting might not be interesting to others. What he thinks is interesting might actually not be credible. What is new and original may actually not, on a review, actually be that original. So it depends on the context. And what is the context here? We will look at the author of The Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry. He's no idiot. He's a PhD in mathematics. Very worshipful Brent Morris highlight what makes a Masonic article interesting after this topic of how can you produce a credible paper. Okay, so let me just close this. First, we're going to look at what makes Masonic writing credible. Okay, and then we're going to have an alternate perspective from the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemason. For him, what is significant is that it must be engaging, it must be interesting. And then we're going to go through some process tips from a past Grand Master of what is probably the largest website, personal website on Freemasonry. The archive version is still on the web. Okay, so we're going to look into that. Let me just... but first, okay, so we know about the 4 functions of being a Masonic scholar. We know about the 4 perspectives or the 4 approaches. How can you make sure that when you start writing, okay, specifically, okay, that you will end up with a credible paper? For that, I must go to the editor of the Philalethe's Journal for Masonic Research and Letters, Worshipful Brother Sean Orrer. This is from his article, Writing a Masonic Paper. The Philalethe's Society is an older version of the Masonic Society. Unfortunately, they're still around, and I actually still subscribe to them. I'm also a life member. The thing with the Philalethe's Society is that they have had major loss of membership in recent years, and they're just starting to regain ground again. There are many reasons for that, which I don't want to go to, but let me just say that they're very senior. They've been around since 1928. Unfortunately, they've had their ups and downs, and they are emerging again, partly because they have a great editor in Brother Sean. Okay, Brother Sean highlights that we should all see our Masonic papers essentially from the initiatic focus of the lodge as a guide. What is the initiatic focus? Remember what we are sought to be taught within the lodge? The 3 pillars of wisdom, strength, and beauty, right? The junior warden has entered apprentice. The junior warden entered apprentice. What's highlighted there in that degree and highlighted by the junior warden is beauty or harmony, right? So that, you get brethren working together, the senior warden and in the fellow craft degree, you're talking about competence or strength, right? So that eventually when you become in the master mason degree, you become unconsciously competent, you become worshipful master, you have wisdom or discretion. Brother Sean highlights that that's the three pillars that we should have in every paper that we do. First, the wisdom to contrive. Have to get the topic right. Okay? But, you have to look at, what, in this regard, what really interests you. Okay? If it's interesting, then that means you'll be engaged in it. But his recommendation is you keep narrowing the topic because it's very easy to go overboard. The narrower the topic, the better. Having picked your topic, okay, then you can focus on, from wisdom and discretion, you focus on strength or competence. The strength to support in terms of the structure, the references you have, and how sound your discussion flows. So the very first thing that you should make sure are that your sources are credible. Hindi lang just from the internet, di ba? Na kung saan-saan, right? When he wrote this article in, I think, 2011, 2010, the internet had a bad reputation for spawning misinformation. There are credible sources now. So with more of them, my suggestion is you have to know where there are credible sources are. And always make it a point to have citations. Because if you have citations, you can highlight that, you're not making it out of thin air. Okay? Provide context when referring to a work. It's very easy to misquote. It's very easy to misquote morals and dogma. Okay, why? You just take something out of the blue. Remember when we were discussing fake news last month? Okay, on the interpretation of a certain church that we are a religion, Albert Pike says there's no salvation in Freemasonry. It's there, yet they say by misquoting somewhere else that we're a religion, right? So provide context. Okay, and develop your own style. We have different styles. If you look at mine, you'll notice that I tend to follow ways that try to make the material simple without being simplistic. That's me, right? If you want to write like like our other local authors, or like that's what you'll become known for. And finally, of course, harmony or beauty, the beauty to adorn. Okay, after you've picked the right topic and focused on making it, so you've supported it with good references, sound logical flow, and a clearly discernible structure. That's when you can focus on polishing, framing, and and further improving your style. Here, you don't have to follow. You can model, but you don't have to follow, a writer blindly. The days of Pike are gone.
I was
Okay,
saying
the days of Pike are gone.
moving in the
Now it's more simpler. Now we tend to not use many terms which are very archaic.
called you
So now you have every opportunity to express yourself. Okay, but if there's one thing you should avoid, it's making it look like you're
Hindi ko maintindihan.
absorbed, or that the only thing that matters is what you consider. Very easy to do that if you're into phenomenology, because you're talking about your experience. So learn to discern the difference. Final point here as to Sean. Okay, he also highlights what to avoid. And in particular, by going to our second degree, he highlights that we should avoid the architectural extremes. For those of you who have gone through our fellow craft degree, you know that there are 5 orders of architecture that we highlight. The 3 of those are in this graphic: the Ionic, which represents the worshipful master; the Doric, which represents the senior warden; and the Corinthian, which represents the junior warden.
Done, man.
I'll stop there.
Going
I'll
nandiyan.
stop there because you know
At saka,
that's for Kuya Dennis. I think you're still on.
sorry.
That's okay. I'll stop there because that goes into what we teach those who enter, no? But what you shouldn't do is go into the other 2 columns, which are the extreme. The Tuscan column of architecture, which has too little substance, or the composite, which is an amalgamation of all these degrees, which is too much substance. So you should avoid saying too little or too much. And the best way to do that, again, is to narrow your topic as into as specific as possible. Okay? Another point that he wants to highlight: be careful not to abuse Masonic authorities. People make mistakes. Okay? No one's perfect. And we can all agree to disagree. If you sincerely believe that you're a fan more of a bridge to light than pillars of wisdom, we can agree to disagree, right? But there's a way to do it civilly. So if you do it in a way that appears personal, that or is uncalled for, that will destroy your credibility as a writer. We talked about this. Also last month. We are not relativists, contrary to what some of those in religious factions that oppose us. We are not relativists. Okay, so your particular interpretation does not diminish the craft's nature as a repository of ultimate truths. Do not be afraid to take a stand. That's the point of using or applying the philosophy. The opposite of that is by being absolute. Okay? You're not God. You're not divine providence. Okay? You always leave room for further insights. Okay? So that is how you can use the initiatic focus as a benchmark. Okay? A good Masonic paper is one with a great topic that is meaningful to you. Is meaningful to you, very narrowly or very specifically defined. That you support with credible references, has sound structure and flow, and speaks to other people with you as an individual. It reflects your personal style. Okay? So, wisdom, the wisdom to contrive, the strength to support, and the beauty to adorn. And then, of course, these are the extremes to avoid. With that, let's go to another perspective. And that perspective is by the immediate past Grand Abbot of the Society of Blue Friars. The Society of Blue Friars are one of the smallest Masonic orders in the world. They're all writers, and to get into it, you must have a substantial body of written knowledge. Very worshipful Brent Morris is the immediate past Grand Abbot. He just retired in 2019. He's also the author. He's more popularly known as the author of The Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry. Okay? And this is the topic of our poll earlier. Okay? Making a good research paper, to Very Worshipful Morris, is first and foremost something that's interesting, something that will get brethren talking. Okay? What's that? That's the integration function. Okay? Get them talking, and hopefully, if you can create something new, the better, but it must get them talking. However, it must be truthful, and it must have a length that is digestible. How can you get that? These are the three major areas that you will find interesting topics. What you think, what I think. But be careful. It's not just what you think or what I think. A personal opinion can be engaging and entertaining if the writing is tight, it doesn't go overly long, and you provide a distinct individual, distinctive approach. Okay, so you provide something that you contribute something to the discussion. That's when the what I think will find you an interesting topic. What about what another person thinks? Well, as long as the source is credible, that's good also. But remember, if the source is not credible, wag na. How do you know if the source is credible or not? You look at the written body of work. In many occasions, if he is purporting to be a long-standing Masonic scholar, if it's his first work, you look at his own sources or her own sources. If it's a non-Mason or a female Mason belong to a non-regular Masonic order who is writing. Okay, there are some good ones. Karen, I forgot the last name. There are some good female writers who are non-regular Masons in their own Masonic orders. You might want to look into those. Okay, so it's not just what he thinks, but sometimes what she thinks also. And then, of course, what is new and original when you are performing truly the investigative function. Okay, but before you can do that, you must have adequate integration. You must have you must have been able to summarize what has gone on before you can really do investigation. And how do you do that? The more you read about Freemasonry, the more you do the third function, integration, the easier it is for you to come up with great topics. Some short discussion on the process itself. Most Worshipful Paul M. Bessa was a former Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C. His site, he doesn't update it anymore, but it's one of the largest personal websites and a great source of information on U.S. Freemasonry. Just click it there. It's been permanently archived for you to study. There are been a growing number of credible websites now since Brother Ayer's article. Here are just 4. Okay, of course, you have our Grand Lodge of the Philippines internet portal that will, if you access the internal website, you will be given instructions as to how to download, for example, not just the app for all of our cable tow, but again, to give credit to Most Worshipful June this term, the app which will download all of our proceedings since we started in 1912. Okay, so a lot of resources there. If you want examples of other good resources, the Grand Lodge of British Columbia has a good information portal. So the benchmark for them is there. It's there, freemasonry.bcy.ca. If you're looking at a model online journal, some of it is really those in the authentic school are not fans. Okay, but some of it, if you're in the other 3 schools, it'll be just for your liking, and that's Petrie Stones. Okay, so there's the website, the Petrie Stones Journal of Freemasonry. Just be careful, of course, to discern what would be found credible here, especially if you're dealing with proponents of the authentic school. And then here you won't have a problem with the authentic school. A good model, a benchmark model personal website is phoenixmasonry.org. That's just one person doing that. You click it tonight after this webinar, you'll find a lot of great stuff. Okay. Having said that, Most Worshipful Bessel comes up with 10 pointers. I'm not going to go into it in detail. You can get this when you get the handout. Pointers which will allow you to better process, better manage the process of actually writing an article. So I will leave that to you to go through in detail, so that in turn I can focus on the last topic. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about the four core functions of a Masonic scholar, of a serious student of Freemasonry, right? Instruction, introspection, applying it, integration, and investigation. You know, getting new insights by philosophical investigation. And then we see that doing that you can do through four different approaches, right? Uh, Authentic, mythical, esoteric, practical. Here, I've given some tips, benchmarks, okay, as to how to do Masonic writing well and credible, right? Brother Iyer highlights that you have to have a great topic which is meaningful to you, okay, wisdom. It must be strongly supported, and your style, your individuality should show. Okay, when it comes to finding an interesting topic, we've seen very worshipful Brent Morris, the author of Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry, highlight that you can find Masonic topics by focusing on what you think, as long as you're saying something different or distinct, what others think, as long as that source is credible, or what's new and original after you've done a lot of reading. Add on to that the tips of Most Worshipful Bessel in actually doing the writing process, and you get us to hopefully having more Masonic scholars in this jurisdiction. Speaking of which, on March 27 of this year, in the evening, we will be coming out soon with the announcements. We will be launching an independent, non-Masonic initiative to promote Freemasonry, not just within the craft, but also outside the craft. Not just to brethren, but to their families, to other sectors of society, by launching officially the Mabini Society for Nationhood. What is the Mabini Society for Nationhood, or MSN? Okay, MSN aims to be the International Learned Society, like Masonic Society, which I described. However, for the study of fraternalism in the Philippine society in general, and particularly the contributions of Freemasonry to the Filipino nation in particular. So, we're not just looking at Masons here joining. These are also, you can be a non-Mason, because this is a learned society. It's an academic society focused on promoting the integration function. And hopefully, more of, among Masons in particular, the investigation function. Okay? How do we do that? Okay, you'll see later. We'll do that first by making sure that we have the right values. It's grounded in Masonic doctrine, but it's academically oriented, so we will not compromise on academic standards. Facts are facts, for example. It's Bayanihan driven. By that we mean that it is a collaborative approach. You will not just find Masonic writers here. You will find all sorts of people, like you will see. You can take a guess into who all of those brethren are there in that screenshot. That was one of our organizational committee meetings. And you will see, if you know them, that you'll find all sorts of interesting brothers, okay, from all walks and from all cliques of our fraternity. Okay, it's not just writers, because we want to capably promote learning about the craft, not just within the fraternity, but outside. So we're not going to be a Masonic organization. I want to highlight that. We're not going to be a Masonic organization, because primarily we'll be an academic society. And we hope to affiliate with the GLP with that in mind, and with three values in how we do our work, in addition to being Masonically grounded, academically oriented, and Bayanihan driven. The first of this is the academic integrity. Second is promoting nationalism. You thank the practical school for that. And of course, being inclusive, trying to make sure that everybody, or as many stakeholders, are participate in this dialogue of using Freemasonry to better build our Filipino nation, which is, as you know, if you go through my presentation in June and this coming one in 2 weeks from now. Again, if you want to schedule for that, just type up Hope Lodge of Kurachi, Kurachee. They'll be making the announcement as to when the presentation is on their Facebook page. So what do we do? Primarily three. We're organized into three communities in addition to our governing board and College of Fellows. First, we have the engagement community. So we will have an academic journal. We will have a comprehensive internet website or internet portal so that we can have a broader, credible discussion of the contribution of Freemasonry to the Philippines and fraternalism in Philippine society in general, and promote better dialogue through more public engagement. In short, try to be provide a public face for the craft. And we'll do that with regular programs. We will have an annual academic conference, which we call an annual festival. We'll have quarterly fellowships, most probably online, featuring, great, and not great. Great is a bit engaging, definitely engaging Masonic speakers. And of course, what we hope to do is provide also venue, particularly for those abroad, those in the United States, those in Saudi Arabia, those in Indonesia. One of our officers is from Indonesia, to provide chapters so that they can be part of activities in the Grand Jurisdiction. As you know, for those of you who are brethren, our jurisdictional rules prevent those who are not resident in the jurisdiction from joining. So what we do hope is through chapters that we will develop, extend our activities in our grand jurisdiction in coordination with the GLP to those brethren and non-brethren outside the Philippines, so that they can participate in activities of the Grand Lodge. And for that, we'll have 3 research councils. Definitely the Council on Masonic Philosophy and Ritual will be limited to Freemasons, because we will be discussing clearly topics there which are private to the fraternity, and that of course includes our liturgy and the secular philosophy behind it, which is based on our oral traditions and the fact that you have to personally engage to do the philosophy. But non-Masons can look forward to joining us in 2 other research councils: Fraternalism and Masonic History. You have a lot of the proponents of the authentic school who will be there, and of course Masonic Governance. Not just studying fraternalism in as how we practice it, for example, when it comes to fraternalism and Masonic history, but how other fraternal orders also, what best practices can we adopt from them, or they can adopt from us, like for example, my patriotic fraternity, the Knights of Rizal. Many Masons are Knights of Rizal, right? Or professional fraternities, right? So we also will have non-Masons can also join Masonic Governance. So the point of this research council is to foster an agenda, a collaborative agenda, where we can expect more of the integrative and investigative function in Masonry going forward. And to promote that, we have a membership process that promotes you entering in without any experience or orientation in Freemasonry as an associate. Okay, so that after doing your own learning projects, which we will provide academic credits for, you can be a member, fellow, and eventually what we call a lifetime fellow in our society. That's all going to happen in terms of being launched March 27 of this month. On behalf of all of us in this new organization, we look forward to welcoming you there. So, Kuya Dennis, I think it's 10 o'clock. First time we hit 10 o'clock. Back to you. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And I hope that you become more serious in your studies with this material that we provided today. Kuya Dennis?
Thank you very much, Kuya Teddy. Again, this has been a very fruitful evening for each and everyone. Apologies a while ago. My goodness, I didn't know my mic was still on, and I was talking with my daughter. Anyway, I was happy to see Paul Bessel in one of your slides, Kuya Teddy. He's a member of our lodge in Hiram Takama Lodge in Washington, D.C. Actually, he
There
did
you go.
become
Most worshipful Paul.
Hanggang right worshipful lang siya. Hindi siya
I think he became a grandmaster.
umabot na ba siya ng 2004?
Yeah.
Okay. Kasi last I saw him was 2005 and then he left. He went in another state. That's why he has to leave.
But I understand that he was eventually able to get
okay, great.
the Grand Oriental chair.
That's great. He's a good guy. He was the one who toured around the
very dedicated
George Washington Masonic Museum. You know, at that time I was really impressed with the way he was talking about the history of our craft. Anyway, so Kuya Teddy, maybe you have to answer some questions. Check on the Q&A. We only have a few questions here. Mukhang intindihan nila halos ang sinabi mo kaya okay. Mukhang gusto lahat mag-membro ng MSM.
Okay, the first one is the question is I have a copy of an old monitor, a 1976 reprint where ETC follows the penalty that is supposed to be mentioned. Like I mentioned earlier, there was one instance when we were revising the Centennial Monitor where we did find that you will not find that in the updated version or even in the original Centennial Monitor, because we took that out because brethren were misinterpreting it. You're not supposed to say etc. You're supposed to highlight the whole penalty again. Okay? How can we be a member of MSN, Mason, Mabini Society for Nationhood? You'll find out March 27, and believe me, we will be spreading the invitation through all the venues of Facebook, all the channels of Facebook. I think that's it.
Okay.
Is there anything else?
I think that's it, Kuya Teddy. And we have a lot of brethren who've been joining us. They're from Urdaneta 302, Pangasinan, who joined in Victory Lodge 116, Aurora Masonic Lodge 190, from R11, Davao Oriental, Davao del Norte, Davao del Oro, Masonic Lodge 67, and the rest I've mentioned already earlier on. To each and everyone, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Just a minute, Kuya Dennis.
Yep.
Kuya Dennis, this is not our last episode. Can I highlight?
Yeah.
Can I highlight? We have one more episode.
Do the pleasure.
Thank you so much. Kuya Dennis, we have one more episode, but this will not be on the 21st of April. Will not be on the third week of April. This will be the second week of April because of ANCOM. We will be having it 1 week earlier. 1 week earlier, April 14, 2021. You should not miss this because our last topic is on our second lecture on Masonic liturgy, and the topic is deeper and richer in time. How the ritual systems of appendant bodies enhance the craft. I will be talking about our major appendant bodies and some other orders and organizations which are connected to us. So I will be talking about the two main classes of appendant bodies and how the ritual systems fit with the craft. And for those of you who don't know, there are many family organizations of Masonry, like Amaranth, Order of the Eastern Star, Job's Daughters, Order of Demolay. There are many other organizations that are professional, that are filled with Masons. BERT, the police have their own organization. There are other social clubs which I have to report here because very worshipful Dennis heads one of them. The Kuya Dennis, you want to hear me?
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
The Shriners, okay? And there are other organizations like Tambayan, which I hope to feature to give you a very comprehensive look at our greater Masonic family. Kasi baka akala nyo, all these 10, 11 episodes na, it's just men mentoring men. No, we have a gigantic and very flourishing greater Masonic family that we're going to talk about in addition to our two major appendant bodies in our last episode on 14th April 2021. So,
That will be
do not miss
exciting.
that. And I hope that will be a fitting conclusion to our web series for this extended Masonic term. Before we wave goodbye, Kuya Dennis. But now, it's goodbye for tonight. Thank you so much, Kuya Dennis, and everyone.
Thank you very much again, Kuya Teddy. Again, your lecture have been very enlightening, and it gave us a different perspective again on how things are moving and how things will move ahead, especially for those who would like to continue on not just learning the craft but also start writing about the craft. And at the end of the day, it will be part of our historic work. So to each and everyone, again, in behalf of our most worshipful Grandmaster, we're very thankful for your participation this evening. We're very glad that you'll be able to join us for the past 10 webinar series. So we're
Kuya
looking
Dennis, nga,
forward.
if we have records, baka we can give nga. For those who are fully
Oh.
attended, we can give certificates if we can.
Yeah,
I think there were some requests for
yeah.
those who have full attendance.
Although
We just have to look at feasibility.
yeah, all the webinars were required. Everyone were required to register. So if they can show proof of registration and then participation, and then maybe we can work that out. That would be very easy.
We'll have a nice certificate.
That's the best we can work on that part. So again, brethren and guests who have joined us this evening, thank you very much. It's been a very fruitful evening once again. Our very worshipful senior grand lecturer is again in his element tonight, and he was very passionate with the way he was able to present, and he was even giving us a new perspective on how to pursue our career in the craft. Yung Mabini
Mabini Society for Nationhood.
For Nationhood, magandang magandang makita yan at baka may future diyan, may future. And the next webinar is going to be very exciting once again because this will talk about organizations, appendant bodies, and our involvement, basically not just as Freemasons but outside of what we do in the craft and how we practice it beyond Freemasonry. So to each and everyone, again, magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. It's been a pleasure seeing you all for the past 10 months. And we'll see you again next month for our last of our webinar series under the term of Most Worshipful Agapito S. Suwan Jr. So sa inyo po lahat, magandang gabi. Thank you, Kuya Teddy. Thank you, Most
Bye-bye.
Worshipful. Good night.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you rin pala sa Cable Tow team. sorry. I almost forgot. Thank you, Cable Tow team. You've been doing a very good
webcasting.
job. Yeah, for webcasting this and for recording everything. You've done a lot of good job for this extended term. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.